Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by the one and only Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to preview Sunday's Week 3 matchup. It will be a noon Central Time kickoff in Nashville, Tennessee, between the Packers and the Tennessee Titans. And we will talk about the Titans at length here in a bit, Wes. But unless you have been living under a rock, which is maybe I'll try that someday, live under a rock, you are aware that Jordan Love has returned to practice for the Green Bay Packers. He was on the practice field Wednesday on a limited basis. There was absolutely no clarification given whatsoever as to what limited meant. What did he actually do at practice? Nobody knows except Jordan Love and the players on the field. But it certainly lends itself to belief that there is a legitimate chance Jordan Love could get medical clearance by the end of this week in order to play against the Titans. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But regardless, the fact that this early after that knee injury in Brazil, Jordan Love is actually back on the practice field doing something within those workouts with his teammates, a huge positive sign for Green Bay.
You and I boarding the buses in Sao Paulo are feeling all over the place of just as much as it hurt to lose the opener. Please don't let this be the end of the Jordan Love story in 2024.
Right.
How the injury looked, you saw the replays of it, how demoralizing that felt, that hopelessness feeling with 15 seconds to go that maybe something significant had happened with Jordan Love. Love said at his locker, it's still one of the most painful things he's ever experienced on a football field. But the fact that he's able to get on the practice field, look as spry as he did. I had a video that kind of, so quote unquote, went viral, like all videos do in this day and age. But a lot of engagement with it, with Jordan bouncing around, dancing around, looking like he's having a good time out there. All those things are just so welcomed considering how things looked less than 2 weeks ago. So we'll see what this all means for Sunday. And Malik Willis talked to his locker as well on Wednesday, and they're going to be ready for whatever scenario unfolds with this situation. But Jordan Love limited, and that's all we learned about what he did in practice on Wednesday. He was limited, team limited. But the fact is that the sigh of relief and the bullet that the Packers appear to have dodged with Love, you just can't talk enough about just the sigh of relief that comes with that. And then along those lines, it was something I wrote about earlier this week. The fact that the Packers were able to create a game plan to win without him, it just only adds to the excitement of what this team could look like with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when it comes to Sunday against Tennessee, the Packers might have the return of Jordan Love, or it might be the so-called revenge tour for Malik Willis going up against his former team. A notion that he, as expected, downplayed it, said, hey, he's got nothing against, how things went in Tennessee. It's an organization that drafted him, took a chance on him. And Malik Willis is just is thankful for whatever opportunity comes his way. So we will see what happens there. What we do know is the opponent will be the Tennessee Titans. And they are 0-2 after a couple of very frustrating losses, actually by the identical score of 24-17, first to the Chicago Bears, then to the New York Jets. And if there's one unit that can't really shoulder a heck of a lot of blame for the Titans starting 0-2, it's that defense. They have allowed just 413 yards total in 2 games. Which leads the league. That is the fewest yards allowed by any defense in the NFL through the first 2 weeks of the season. This is going to be, whether it is Love or Willis under center, this is going to be a very different kind of challenge for the Packers offensively.
Yeah, and the impressive thing about what Tennessee has done is they've done this without an interception so far. They've achieved this without having like a big sack sort of thing. I mean, Harold Landry has 3 sacks, but it's not like it's these name sort of guys that have been accomplishing all this. They've been doing it with the sum of the whole.
Yeah.
And Denard Wilson going in there, I think it's been such a breath of fresh air for them. Not to say what Mike Vrabel did all those years didn't work. They had a lot of success there too, but it just seems like the direction that this thing headed with Brian Callahan taking over as the head coach and giving the reins to Wilson after everything that the Baltimore Ravens did last year. Mike, you and I have talked about it numerous times. I've never seen a coaching staff, a particular side of the ball, get gutted the way that the Ravens did. Yeah. And we're talking head coaches, we're talking defensive coordinators, we're talking about guys moving up in the scheme of things, with how dominant Baltimore was during stretches last season. So now Wilson comes here, he puts on his own swerve onto this thing, as we were talking about with Matt LaFleur on Wednesday. Guy that kind of comes out of that Greg Williams sort of tree, that aggression, wanting to get after it, but also very calculated in what they've been able to accomplish. So the first 2 weeks, and I watched basically all of that Bears game.
So did I.
If the Titans could have just played defense the entire time and not had to worry about the other two phases, they come out of there with a victory.
Yeah, they would have beaten the Bears and might have beaten them handily. They had, that game was 17-0?
Yeah,
I think?
yeah.
The
Bears scored 24 unanswered to win it.
Yeah, they let that one get away. Bottom line, and the first two games, both of these games the Titans have lost, they have gotten off to fast starts. They have built double-digit leads, I believe, in both contests. They have outscored their opponents 27-10 in the first halves of these first two games. You mentioned Landry has the 3 sacks. You have Jeffrey Simmons in the middle of that defensive line. He's now paired with is it Tavondre? If I get the first name correctly, Tavondre Sweat. So this is as Larry McCarron likes to say, this is a salty group up front, and but where the Titans have had trouble is the mistakes on offense and the mistakes on special teams. They've had a punt blocked in each of their first two games. One of those was returned for a touchdown by the Bears, by former Packer Jonathan Owens, actually.
Yeah.
The other one, I can't remember for sure if it set up a field goal or a touchdown for the Jets, but led to points for the Jets. So two blocked punts in the first 2 weeks. And then on the offensive side, with quarterback Will Levis, it's been the turnovers. He's turned the ball over 5 times himself, multiple interceptions, multiple lost fumbles, and really the plays that have been the killers and that have generated so much attention is where Levis has turned the ball over trying to be a superhero.
Yeah.
He's under pressure. And instead of just taking the sack and living to play another play, he's trying to do something miraculous. And against the Bears, it led to a wacky shovel pass out toward the sideline that was returned for a pick 6 by Tyreek Stevenson. Against the Jets, they were in the red zone, in position to score points. And he tries a shovel thing to a running back off to the side while he's getting sacked, and the ball ends up kind of rolling and bouncing on the ground, and the Jets recover it, and the Titans don't get any points out of that drive. And Brian Callahan has not minced any words in terms of how he feels about his quarterback's lack of protection of the football. So that's the area that the Titans are really focused on here is getting Levis to play more within himself, let the offense do the work. He has been sacked 7 times. They have issues up front, and that's certainly something I'm sure the Packers are looking at here going into this game. But Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, these guys have weapons. Levis has weapons around him, and it's one of those things that you figure it's probably just a matter of time before they can start to put it together a little bit more consistently. Hopefully the Packers can keep them on that, up and down, inconsistent level for at least another week here.
The Titans, especially, and I watched the game, as I mentioned too, they remind me so much of the Bears offensively, where it's like they got all these weapons and a young quarterback and an offensive line that's really struggling so far. So when you look at the amount of pressure, the amount of hits that he's taken, and the amount of takeaways, it seems to lend itself very well to what the Packers have been doing well defensively through the first 2 weeks of the season. But as Xavier McKinney was discussing at his locker on Wednesday, there are so many things that give you pause as far as the threats in which the Titans can hurt you. Calvin Ridley has gotten his career back on track, and he got rewarded for it this past offseason. I thought last week against the Jets really showed that he is still every bit of a dynamic receiver that he was earlier in his career. They have Tyler Boyd, who's been a consistent performer for years, DeAndre Hopkins, a guy in Treylon Burks that you and I were talking about as a potential Packers pick 3 years ago.
Yeah, he ended up being a mid first round pick, if I recall correctly.
And then Tony Pollard goes there. And while there are these questions about Tyjae Spears and whether or not he's going to be available for this one, not practicing due to an ankle on Wednesday, Pollard showed last year with Dallas. I mean, he is a bell cow back if you allow him to be, and they've been feeding him. So the number one thing they have to clean up, and it was another thing that McKinney touched on, for everything that's gone wrong for the Titans the first 2 weeks, much like the Packers are doing, they're doing their own research. They're doing their own review. They're trying to make their own corrections to make sure that you can avoid that going into this matchup with Green Bay. From the Packers' perspective, it is about generating pressure, though. And if Levis does give you an opportunity, taking the football away, 5 interceptions through the first 2 games of the season, 7 all of last year combined, the Packers are feeling themselves a little bit in that regard. The confidence, the swagger is there that if the ball is in the air, the secondary is going to make a play.
Yeah, and I want to get to our keys to victory for this game for Green Bay in just a minute, but first I'll take care of sponsor business. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better.
Can I break in for 1 second there? I was talking to my dad. My dad, Pahad, avid listener of Packers Unscripted. We appreciate your patronage and everything else you do to support me, Father.
Absolutely.
He was actually on the fence about whether or not you were going to remember the read with how long our show went on Tuesday. Because I think from what Pahad Stats and Info said, we got to the 26-minute mark before we got the read in.
Yeah, and usually the show's over by then. So, yeah, we did. We went pretty long on Tuesday. And, just a lot to talk about
there
from that game. But, yes, I did remember, and we ended up having kind of an extra long show on Tuesday there. Well, you just brought it up, Wes, with regard to pressure defensively for the Packers. I think we both would agree that will be one of the keys to victory here. And that Packers defensive front is waiting for an opportunity like this to, get in a little bit more of that pin your ears back mode, or at least when it gets to, say, 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 9 or something like that, right? Because the plan has been, to rush to contain Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson, not necessarily rush to sack them. As a result, the Packers have just 3 sacks through the first 2 games of the season, which ranks toward the bottom of the league. But that's been partly the result of the plan, and I would say plan-wise that has worked pretty well when you look at the fact that those 2 quarterbacks, as I said on our last show, they combined for only 70 rushing yards through the first 2 games, and about 50 of those 70 rushing yards were in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So in the first 3 quarters of the first 2 games, the Packers' pass rush plan worked very, very well. This will be a little bit different. Will Levis does have 8 carries for 74 yards on the season, most of those being of the scramble variety. So he will take off and run. He can take off and run. What I caution against in this game is because of everything we just previously talked about with Will Levis, where the message is trying to be pounded into him, don't force the ball, don't try to be a hero, only take what's there. He may be more inclined than he's ever been before to take off and run with the ball if he's not seeing what he wants to see when he's in the pocket. I think the Packers need to be cognizant of that as much as they want to get after him and employ a more traditional pass rush plan against a quarterback as opposed to the first 2 weeks. You have to kind of be aware of just the situation Will Levis is in and how these first couple of games have gone for him, because if he thinks he has a chance to get the first down with his legs, he's going to take it instead of putting the ball in harm's way.
The consequences are not as drastic for the Green Bay Packers if Will Levis gets out into the open field as, let's say, Jalen Hurts. We saw that ourselves with our own eyes in Philadelphia 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
But the danger is still omnipresent. And I think the big lesson that if I'm Jason Rebrovich and Jeff Hafley, and I'm talking to these guys this week, is, hey, listen, we achieved our goals in the first 2 games of the season. And there's a lot of selflessness that went along with that, a lot of team mindset played into that. But that doesn't mean now is the time to forsake your rush lanes or to let your gaps go. You still have to rush with a plan. It can't just all be going back with your ears here thinking you're just going to be going after a statue. That's not the case.
Right.
So what my message would be is, as well as we performed the last 2 weeks, this is the plan we're implementing. This is how we want to go about doing it. Stick to that, and the rest will work itself out. Because here's the thing, Michael, you're right. Will Levis is going to be thinking at the beginning of this game, all right, clean slate, no turnovers, let's play good football. But as the punches and the kicks and everything happens throughout the course of the first half and into the third quarter, and you get into winning time if it comes down to it, that's where you start going back on what your preset function is.
Yeah.
That's where the things can lapse a little bit, and that's where the Packers have to get to. So yeah, the first quarter has worked out great for the Packers this season. They've gotten takeaways, they've gotten stops. If you have the opportunities, get them, but don't chase them is going to be the biggest thing here, because on paper, I think the way the Packers have performed on scale, this would be a game I would expect the Packers to go in and win, regardless of who is starting at quarterback. But you have to earn it. You have to play smart in order to achieve it.
Yeah, you want to be able to keep that turnover train going, not just the Packers' defensive turnover train, but that offensive turnover train of the Titans, because if you can get another takeaway early in this game,
yeah,
you put an opponent like the Titans into like, oh, here we go again mood, like, we haven't gotten these things fixed, and this is just going to be just like these other games with the mistakes. And if you can force that kind of a mistake early on, I think it could go a long way. Offensively, whether it's Love or Willis at quarterback for the Packers, obviously you'd like to be able to run the ball like the Packers did against the Colts every single week in this league. You'd be a very, very difficult team to beat. That's not realistic. 50 plus carries, 260 plus rushing yards is not realistic. But if you can get enough going on the ground and that really gets your play action game going, I mean, I've said it many times, Jordan Love was at the peak of his powers in the second half of last season. It was when Aaron Jones was running the ball really well, and the play action pass was just open.
Right.
Stuff was open for Jordan Love. So whether it's Love or Willis at quarterback, I think the play action game is huge here against a defense that has had a lot of success shutting teams down in the first couple weeks. Obviously, you have to protect the ball. The Packers have done a pretty decent job of that. Josh Jacobs has put the ball on the ground once in each of the first 2 games.
Yep.
So the ball security, the attention to the ball security there is necessary for him. But I think offensively this comes down to the play action game for Green Bay.
Really quickly before, and I agree with you on that, I love listening to Ben's sermons. We talked to him on Wednesday night. I mentioned this to you as soon as I came back. You always learn something, those Ben sermons,
yeah.
The Packers running back, his news conferences.
Absolutely.
Because we got into the discussion towards the end of his presser about just exactly what's going on with Jacobs, and the analogy he used, and maybe he's spit that at us before and I haven't thought much about it, but it was the Jaguar analogy, where a Jaguar, when is running as fast as they are, they use their tail basically to keep their balance when they're cutting fast. With running backs, when a guy is moving quickly, that's where the arms go up, because naturally, without thinking about it, that's how your body is responding to make sure that you stay balanced.
Yeah.
The job of the NFL running backs coach and the NFL runner is to still keep that ball in tight when those things happen. What you're seeing with the Josh Jacobs fumbles so far, both of them pretty much have been when he's trying to change direction in allowing the ball to get away from his body. Sermons feels like that's correctable. It's something they want to work on with him. But again, it's just something very unique to the way he runs. It's also what makes him a brilliant running back. It got the Packers so many yards over expectation in that game against the Colts. And so you tip your hat to him on that regard. I think this game is won in 2 different capacities. I think it's one on the ground. I think Josh Jacobs dealing with a back injury yet. We'll have to see where he's at. Emmanuel Wilson, Sermon says he feels like he's ready for a bigger role if that's what's called upon now that Marshawn Lloyd has gone to injured reserve with the ankle. But conversely, Tony Pollard is the kind of guy that could give you a lot of headaches, especially with the way the Packers and the yards that they're giving up per carry right now, because he's a plodding kind of back. He's up to 144 rushing yards on the year, but only a long right now of 26. He's a guy that is going to continually try to wear you down. The Packers have to curb against that. The other thing where Green Bay needs to come through here is protecting the football. Tennessee's defense has done so many things well here so far, except taking away the football.
Yeah.
They have one takeaway so far this season, tied for 24th in the league. Only 2 other teams have 0 so far this year. They have 1 interception, I believe it is. No, 1 fumble recovery is what it is. No interception. So whether it's Love, whether it's Malik Willis, regardless of who's carrying the football, the Packers need to make sure that thing does not get over to the Tennessee Titans, because both of these games, the first 2 weeks for Tennessee, have been lost by the turnover margin and the points that have been generated off them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And the other thing I will add is I mentioned the block punts that Tennessee has struggled with on special teams. This is the kind of game where you have to win the special teams battle in some form or fashion. And I'm not saying the Packers need to block another punt by Tennessee, but when a special teams unit is struggling the way Tennessee's is, you can't let them get the upper hand on you in a matchup like this. The Packers need to win the special teams battle, whether that's Braden Narvison having a perfect day kicking instead of having the one miss that he's had. Daniel Whelan continuing to do what he's done with pinning opponents inside the 20-yard line with his punts. Maybe it's Keyshawn Nixon or Jaden Reed, kickoff return, punt return, making something happen. The Packers need to win that phase because they are going up against a unit that is struggling and trying to fix a bunch of things.
Yeah.
So you got to come out ahead there in the field position battle.
We know there's no gambling in Bushwood, so let's just, handshake on this.
Yeah.
NFL, no gambling happening here. What week do you think Keyshawn Nixon's finally going to have a real returnable kickoff?
Yeah.
He might return one,
right.
But at what point, let's say within 3 yards of the goal line, into the end zone?
Yeah, maybe Thanksgiving night against Miami or something like that. He's not going to get the opportunities unless a kicker just completely mishits.
I can't wait for the Packers Unscripted when we break down this new kickoff at the end of the season. We made all these changes, all these structural changes. It's like, hey, I'm going to completely renovate my house and I'm not going to live in it. It's like, hey, I'm going to redo the cabinets and all the appliances and everything like that. And then I'm going to go sit in the garage for 6 months.
Yeah.
This is why they wanted it at the 35 though, right?
Yeah, they tried something that essentially it's not any worse than all the touchbacks we've been watching for the last couple of years. Just now the touchbacks are, the ball is on the 30-yard. The one thing I'll say where, those 5 yards can make a difference at any point. The one thing I'll say, and it sort of hit me watching the Monday night game this past Monday night after the Eagles kicked the field goal against the Falcons to go up 6. And then they kicked the ball off into the end zone, and the Falcons had plenty of time because of the drop third down pass and all that. But when you've got a last ditch 2-minute drive and you're starting on the 30-yard line instead of the 25, it's sort of like, and obviously as Matt LaFleur had said in Brazil, it wasn't communicated to Nixon to not take that last kickoff out of the end zone. He lost about 5 seconds and about 15 yards where the Packers could have been able to start that final drive on the 30-yard line where they were just trying to get into Hail Mary position. Right. And conversely, Daniel Whelan pinning the Colts on the 5-yard line on that final drive last week where they did get out into very close to the Hail Mary position. If that punt is a touchback on the 20 instead of on the 5, that final drive perhaps looks different there as well. But before we go, a quick glance at some other key games that we'll be keeping our eyes on in Week 3. I think the biggest one is a pair of 2-0 teams. Houston is at Minnesota. Minnesota, the only 2-0 team in the NFC North so far. Houston, C.J. Stroud, the second-year quarterback, that offense, and that defense, quite frankly, they've other than those long passes they gave up to Anthony Richardson in Week 1, Houston's defense has been pretty tough. Obviously, Chicago Bears, their offensive line has had its struggles, and the Texans took advantage of that. But a really interesting one at U.S. Bank with 2-0 teams in Week 3. Yeah,
and again, Minnesota, the way they've been performing so far, and you can see the locker room videos, how excited they are, and I credited Kevin O'Connell for a lot of that earlier this week. seeing the adjustment's going to be important. There was a lot of fervor and there was a lot of hype behind Josh Dobbs last year too when they started to turn things around. Seeing if they can maintain this. It sounds like from what I understood that Aaron Jones might already be a little banged up already with a hip. I don't think it's anything that's going to keep him out, but I mean, again, he's the guy in that backfield, and they need weapons right now. So the thing I'm most interested to see, though, is how the Vikings offense, the Vikings defense handles the C.J. Stroud effect, because there's something about that offense right now, man, where I just think it's one of the more exciting units in football. It looks like the Joe Mixon thing has been a tremendous signing for them. I questioned that at first. I just wondered if, where Mixon was going with his career, if maybe this was getting towards the end. But they got everything they need to put points up against you, and it'll be a good little track meet over at Minneapolis.
Yeah, I think so too. Philadelphia is at New Orleans. Interesting there, because can the Saints playing at home get to 3-0 and attract even more attention? Whereas can the Philadelphia Eagles on a short week going on the road bounce back from coughing that one up at home to the Falcons on Monday night with that last-minute drive by Kirk Cousins?
Did you see that stat on Derek Carr as far as the number of scoring drives he started the season with? It was like 15 straight scoring drives.
It's something crazy.
The next closest is like 8 to start a season.
Clint Kubiak, the new offensive coordinator for the New Orleans Saints, he's already being talked about as a head coaching candidate after 2 weeks of the Saints putting up 40+ each of their first 2 games this season.
Alvin Kamara looking like a beast still. Olave's there. I mean, there's a lot to like. But yeah, that's a huge turnaround for Philly because they're coming off a demoralizing loss.
And it's a short week, and then they play on Monday night at home. They have to jump on a plane on Saturday, go on the road. Those are challenging situations. Baltimore, the Ravens, trying to avoid 0-3, going into Dallas to play the Cowboys. And it's interesting, Wes, because when we were talking last year, the Packers were in the wild card round going down to Dallas, and everything was, the Cowboys had however long of a home winning streak it was, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now, combining the wild card game last January with the Cowboys home opener last week, they not only have lost their last 2 home games, they have gotten blown out at home in their last 2 games in Dallas, and they are at home again facing a Ravens team that's kind of up against it, because I know there's a 7th playoff spot. I know there's the 17 games now instead of 16, but 0-3, man, that's a big hole that John Harbaugh and company are trying to avoid.
Absolutely, and again, as I talked about on Tuesday's show, the margin for victory in this league and the margin for error is so small and narrow. And just look at Baltimore to see a good example of that. People are going to make this out to be about Mike McCarthy, and to some extent it will, because he's the guy that ultimately hires his coaches. But the Mike Zimmer defense here, this is a huge test for them.
Big time.
Because of what they accomplished last year. For them to be able to make this transition this year with the expectations that they have and having their top cornerbacks back, or at least in theory we're going to have them back, they have to be able to respond here against Lamar Jackson and this Baltimore offense. Very, very intriguing matchup to see exactly how that plays out.
Last one to get a quick thought on, much like Houston and Minnesota, where that's an NFC North rival playing a team the Packers are going to see later in the season, the Detroit Lions are going on the road to play Arizona.
Yep.
That is a team that the Packers will face later this season as well. The Lions trying to bounce back from the home loss to the Buccaneers. The Cardinals, they fell in week 1, looked awfully good in week 2, and the Cardinals seeing if they can really get something going with Kyler Murray, and as you mentioned on our last show, Marvin Harrison Jr.
I have a lot of respect for Kyler Murray, so I don't want this to come off as a diss, but I love all this conversation right now about him and how he's playing and what the difference has been with him. And I keep telling people over and over again, I mean, he was really good his first 2 years when Tom Clements was his position coach.
Yeah.
I just want to throw that out there. But he is a supernaturally talented guy. It seems like he has some great synergy already with Marvin Harrison Jr. Exciting offense. Again, another exciting offense in the situation, the game they play. Seeing this clash between the way the Lions like to do things and what potentially is there for the Cardinals, I think that's going to be something that'll be, we won't be able to watch it, but that'll be fun for a lot of people to check out.
Yeah, we'll be, I guess, trying to, by the time we get on the plane, I suppose we'll be checking the score to see if we can catch some highlights of what's going on between Detroit and Arizona. But
I got one more thing. I love the other thing about the National Football League. I did not want to see Tua get hurt, but we all, including myself, kind of wrote the obituary here on the Buffalo Bills. And now they are in a position to go 3-0 here, going up against the 0-2 Jacksonville Jaguars, amidst all their changes, amidst all the questions about Josh Allen and if he's overrated or whatever else. Death, taxes, Buffalo Bills in the AFC East now. I just feel like that team and what they've built, there's been some guys that have come and gone, but in this post-Tom Brady era, I think you got to give a lot of respect to Sean McDermott for what they built there.
Absolutely, and I'll throw this out as well because we were just talking about the Cardinals. Week 1, the Cardinals had a 17-3 lead in Buffalo over the Bills. They let that get away, and the Bills have shown that they're looking like a team that remains a contender. But the Arizona Cardinals, I mean, that's about as long a flight as it gets, in this league if you're not playing internationally, to go from Phoenix all the way to Buffalo, and they jumped all over those guys, and Arizona let that one get away. I'm really interested to see what Arizona does at home against.
It's a fun weekend of games, absolutely. Going to be cool to watch.
With that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and everything from Sunday's game in Nashville. Wes and I will both be there. We will have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.